Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Cold Coffee ELT podcast. My name is Natalie Nadovska-Rees, and I'm a CELTA, CELT-P, and TKT certified English teacher with experience in teaching English for over a decade now, and I'm also a conference presenter and Zeno expert. We continue our series of podcasts to support teachers all around the world. And in our last podcast, we were talking about teaching in different contexts. To watch this video, please follow the link and you'll see on your screen just now. Due to the situation in my native country, I'm far away from home right now. And however, I'm in touch with my colleagues basically every day, and I can see that a lot of us have changed their jobs or are in the process of it. A lot of them admit that it does feel scary and intimidating to change something in their lives. And that's why everyone appreciates any advice or guidance that we could share in our professional circles. That's why today we're going to talk about how to find a job, how to make yourself attractive to an employer, and things to bear in mind when looking for a job. Today here with me is Chris Riz, a CELTA and Delta Module 1 trainer, and most importantly, an ELT manager with experience in managing both private language schools and mainstream educational programs, who has a lot of experience in interviewing people for a position. So hi, Chris.
Oh, thanks.
Welcome to our podcast today, and thank you very much for finding the time. So let's get straight to the point, right?
Yeah.
The first question that I'm going to ask you, let's start from the very, very beginning. I'm a teacher who wants to change my job, and I'm looking for all the opportunities I can basically find. Where do I look for a job?
Well, I think the place to start from before you even think of where do I look for a job is what kind of job do I want? Because if we talk about working, the work that we do as English teachers, teachers can find jobs in like a secondary school or a primary school, which would be something public or state run. You could wind up working for a private language school, which many people also do. You could wind up working as an in-company teacher. And well, where you need to look for your job is going to depend on what kind of job you're looking for. If you're looking for a position in a state school, it's probably best to just go and inquire with the state school, see if they're hiring anyone or if anyone nearby is hiring anyone. Usually the schools themselves will know who is hiring, if there's anyone in the district or in the area that might need a teacher.
So they can actually recommend something.
Yeah. And cold calling is never a bad idea. Just call them and ask, send them a letter and ask if you see a school or an area that you might be interested in working in. Well, that's worked for me in the past, and we'll come back to that as a point. There's also job listing sites like Dave's ESL Cafe, which is mostly job listings in Asia. I think it's Ajarn's what it's called. Glassdoor, Monster, and there's often lots of websites that are more specific to the country. For example, Work.ua for Ukrainians, which is a pretty popular one.
Yeah. Robota.ua, I also think is very popular.
Right. So there's going to be kind of sites. I think the most important thing is to look at, and you can talk to people who already work in that area, because they'll typically know where the job listings are posted. So if you know someone who, let's say, works in a private language school and you're looking for a job in a private language school, maybe reach out to them first, see what they can recommend. If you're in a new place, or for example, you're away from home, you're in a new country, just write letters, just write emails, get contacts, call people on the phone, see who's hiring. I mean, it seems a little bit outdated in the 21st century to go kind of knocking door to door, but it works.
Don't wait.
Yeah.
Look for opportunities, right? So next question becomes, how do I write my CV? How do I tailor probably my CV for a position?
Well, this comes back to the kind of position that you're applying for. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit, kind of, let's say 4 different contexts that you might talk about. So right now I work in managing a secondary program. So the program that I work with, we get students from about the A1, A2 level. Our job is to, in a period of about 3 years, get them to a strong A2 or a good B1 level of English. So that means that if I'm looking at a prospective applicant, I really need someone who can work with kids, who can work with preteens, early teenagers, who can manage them, who can engage them. Maybe you've got experience preparing people for IELTS, but well, we don't really do IELTS prep. So that's nice. It tells me a lot about you, but that may not be the most important thing that I'm looking for on the application. So in this case, any experience that you can demonstrate managing kids, in addition to any other experience, or for example, if you've got a PhD in applied linguistics, well, I don't necessarily need someone who's got a PhD in applied linguistics to teach A2 level students. I need someone who can teach kids. So in this case, I would be looking at things like YL certification, CELT-P, CELT-S, relevant experience, teaching YL, or relevant experience teaching English to kids. Ideally, good knowledge of teaching methodology. So a CELTA may not hurt, even though it's not really a certificate for teaching kids. That will tell me that, okay, the teacher's got the background at least that I'm looking for. So this would be in a secondary school, but let's contrast this. Let's say you're applying for a job in a private language school. Well, in this case, probably the things that the employer might be looking for, well, if it's a private language school, you're probably going to be asked to teach a variety of levels. So you probably need to demonstrate on your CV what levels you can teach. Obviously, the more levels that you can teach, the more desirable you're going to be as an applicant. And as a teacher in a private language school, you usually have to be a bit of a jack of all trades. So can you teach kids? Because that would also be a benefit. Lots of people have to teach kids as part of their timetable if they work in a private language school. Can you be sent to in corporate clients? Do you have experience teaching business English or legal English? What other skills can you bring to the table? If you work for an exam prep center, or a center that does mostly IELTS prep or Cambridge exam prep, this is something you're going to have to highlight. You're going to have to demonstrate that you've got awareness of the exams and things that they prepare for, because usually an exam prep center isn't going to want to invest in training someone from scratch. They're going to want to hire a finished product. Usually these centers want to invest in a finished product. Doesn't mean they'll never train someone new, but it means that they're going to need to see some relevant experience preparing people for exams and getting results. And that's going to be the most important thing to them. If we compare that with something like an in-house English teacher, well, again, what experience do you have being an in-house English teacher? What qualifications do you have? And if we're talking about an in-house English teacher, like for a company or something like that, they'll probably need a little bit of business English or English for specific purposes. So what's the evidence that you can do that? And what's the evidence that you can teach a lesson that's going to meet their needs, as well as, ticking on the boxes of having the qualifications and having the experience.
Which gets us to another question. Is it a good idea to send the same CV to basically all the companies where I'm employed?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because you're going to get rejected. They're not even going to hire you, because when someone, I don't remember the exact number, but when a hiring manager reads a CV, the statistic is they spend on average about 1 minute reading your CV. And that's, in my experience, that's lucky. I think I read quite quickly, so I probably spend even less time than that looking at a CV. Because when I look at someone's CV, I do a once over of it, and I say, am I interested in this person or not? And that's really how much time you've got to show that you've got relevant experience. Maybe, because of that, I've missed qualified, talented employees in the past. But that's also not the only thing I had to do that day. That's one of the many responsibilities that I've got as a manager, and HR programs and HR departments are going to have the same thing. Any director of studies is going to have the same issue. Filling that position is not their only responsibility that day. So they're not going to read your CV extremely carefully to see that it's relevant. You've got to show them that it's relevant, and that's the job of a well-written CV.
All right. What else do I need to pay attention to apart from CV?
Well, if you're applying for a job that has an application portal of some sort, they're going to tell you everything they need. If you're just applying cold, there are some things that generally work. Everyone knows about cover letters. But going back to the point, you never want to send the same cover letter The cover letter is the way it was explained to me, where you explain your CV. That your CV gives the highlights of your achievements, not of your qualifications and your knowledge. That's a common problem, but of your achievements. What have you done in your career? Because maybe you know about lots of things, but you can't do anything. Well, so lots of action verbs, lots of most likely shortened forms of present perfect, things like that, to show your career accomplishments, the things that you were responsible for, or managed, or did, or achieved. And the cover letter is where you take these separate achievements and points and you explain to the person reading it how this makes you a good fit for the position. And if you're applying for different positions, that could be written in very different ways. Because maybe in one you're applying for a general English teaching position, maybe one you're applying to a secondary school. Well, that's two very different sets of skills that you need. So you would need to explain this and also address any potential questions that the interviewer might have. So for example, let's say that you've not got, say that you are applying for a position in a secondary school, but you've got mostly experience teaching adults in a private language school. Okay, so you're gonna have to connect that experience to teaching teenagers. And that's not something you're gonna be that's gonna be easily done in a CV. That's something that you've got the opportunity to do in your cover letter. Other things that you might look at, and things that I found helpful for me when I've applied for jobs in the past, consider not just sending them a cover letter, but also sending them a short introductory video, 1 minute, tops 1 minute.
That's interesting.
So a short introductory video where you basically talk them through all of the points that are on your cover letter. But I think with the benefits of technology, this is really easy to send because you just drop it in a Google Drive folder, send them the link along with your cover letter. They can watch it. And this does lots of things for you. This lets them see you. They can see you. They see how you talk. They see how you communicate. They see how you hold yourself. You can already kind of make a very good first impression on them.
That's actually a very good idea. I've never thought about that.
Yeah. And that's something which has worked out very well for me in the past as well. I found that when I've done this, I've actually gotten callbacks and offers for interviews much more frequently. Now, it doesn't mean I've always gotten them, but I do find it happens a bit more frequently when I've got that.
Did it change somehow the way the interview went, or?
Not really, but I think it made people, very often when you read a cover letter or you look at a CV, you get only a very superficial glance of who a person is. And when you see them introduce themselves, even for a minute, you learn a lot about them. You get to see lots of things about them.
Gestures, body language, things like that.
And especially for a position such as a teacher, where communication and the ability to communicate information clearly to others is the definition of the job. I mean, teaching is how do I get this information to them and make them able to use it? So seeing that someone is able to articulate themselves and express themselves clearly is a very strong benefit. And possibly even having a recorded demo lesson to send along with it. If you've got a lesson where they can see you teaching, well, if I'm on the fence about you and I'm not sure that if I'm going to invite you for an interview or not, I've got a video intro, I'm probably going to watch it. And well, if I'm thinking, well, they look like a pretty good match, but okay, I can already see them teaching. And I don't have to arrange a class. I don't have to schedule a time. I can already watch this. Well, okay, I'll watch 10 minutes of the lesson. I'll see how it goes. Okay, this looks pretty good. I'll watch another 5 minutes of the lesson, see how it goes. Okay, I want to interview this person. And again, I feel as the hiring manager much safer in doing this because now I've already got an idea of what I'm buying. I've already got an idea of what's coming in, if what I can offer them, of what they can offer me, how much support they're going to need, what they do well, what mistakes they make. But now I've got a much more informed opinion of you as a person, which means that if I hire you, it's now a much lower risk to me.
True, yeah. Do you think it's a good idea to send, for example, a demo lesson of an online lesson?
I have. Yeah.
Even if I'm applying for example, a position teaching face-to-face.
Send what you've got. If they want to see you teach another demo lesson face-to-face, why not? They might. Something's better than nothing.
That, right?
Yeah, why not? They might ask for that, or they might ask you to teach something to them in the interview, or they might ask you to. But the aim that we've got now is not to skip this in the interview, it's to get us to the interview. So anything that we can do that
Right.
gets us to the interview is lovely.
Okay.
And right now, considering that most schools are going to ask you to teach either online or in a hybrid way, I mean, the days of teachers who purely teach offline are finished. So in almost every position that you apply for, you're going to have to do
Yeah.
online teaching sometimes, you're going to have to do hybrid teaching, you're going to have to do offline teaching. So any part of that puzzle that you can show them that you can do is better than nothing. And as well, if you've got a good social media following, link them to that as well, so they can see if you've got any social media pages related to teaching or what you do with your students, link them to that.
What
Show
if
them
I
who
have
you are.
only, cute pictures of, I don't know, cats and
Probably
flowers?
don't. Yeah, probably don't. This is only if you've got kind of a professional, like a LinkedIn page or a professional Instagram that you use. Let's say if you're a private tutor, for example, many private tutors have these, and they can be very good to share.
How important are these different social media?
Think of it as a supplement to your CV.
Mm-hmm.
So my CV shows my achievements, but it's often very cut and dry. My Instagram and my blogging that I do is a way that my prospective employers can see more about who I am, what I do with my students, how I interact with them, the way, again, more about how I present myself. And it's also a chance to show that I know things. Because probably if I've got, for example, I keep some posts, which I used to be much more active in doing, related to teaching and teacher training and teacher development, because that's a sphere that I've worked in for almost half a decade. So that's something which I posted a lot of, and that's something that in interviews people have brought up to me, and they've said, "Oh yeah, I was reading through some of your blog posts, and some of those were really good." It's like, okay, well, I know A, they've read it, and B, they know who I am now, and I've left an impression on them compared to someone who didn't have this, who is this unknown quantity, and maybe they are a better fit for the job than I am. But it's me sitting in an interview, not them. So
fair enough, yeah. All right, next question. How might job interviews vary in different countries or even in different parts of the world?
I think this is going to be something that if you go to an interview with a smaller school, that's really, no matter where you are in the world, that's an unknown quantity. Because really anything can happen in interviews with a smaller school. In an interview with a larger organization like International House, British Council, or Bell, or one of the big schools, it's going to be pretty standard. Usually there may be a 2-interview process. The first one usually getting to know you, feel her out. They may ask you to teach a demo lesson, or to teach something as a demonstration. And then the final interview, which is kind of agreeing on terms and start dates and things like that, negotiating salary.
So everything is pretty standard, I would say.
In ELT, yes, because what you often find is people who own English language schools are often tend to run it in a very Western way, although this certainly isn't always the case.
Okay. What are some tips to be successful in a job interview?
I think thing number one is to be friendly. And lots of people forget that. It's just to be friendly. It's a talk with you and with them. One thing that's always helped me is to remember that it's not only them who is interviewing me, I'm also interviewing them. Because even if they offer me the job, I don't have to take it. And it can actually even be worth, as a complete aside, going to interviews for jobs that you know you don't want, just to practice A, interviewing, and B, to practice saying no.
Because again, you don't lose anything.
Right. You don't lose anything. And it's also a big confidence builder. It's like, okay, well, I can get a job. I know I can get a job, but I don't want that job. I'm holding out for what I know I can get and what I know I deserve. I think thing number two, in addition to being confident, rehearsing, is to, being friendly, is to engage with what the interviewer is saying to you.
Meaning?
So for example, the interviewer is probably going to give you feedback at certain points, especially if they're a good interviewer, like a director of studies. If there's nothing kind of annoys me when interviewers just say, yes, okay, and they don't give you any feedback on how the answer was. But very often they will give you some feedback, or they might say, okay, it's a good idea. You could also try this. Or, okay, well, why would you do it that way? If you catch them giving you any feedback, taking an open, curious approach to it is often helpful. If the examiner sees that, or if the interviewer sees that you're being argumentative, you're not going to get the job. And I'm speaking from experience here. I have been argumentative before, and I have not gotten jobs because of it. If they see that you're open and really willing to engage with the feedback that you're getting, I mean, if they've asked you to the interview, they're already thinking about hiring you. You don't ask anyone to come to an interview who you are not theoretically ready to hire.
Sure, yeah. Which
means that what you're really looking for, what I often look for first and foremost, is attitude. That someone's got the right attitude. It's even, I would say, before being a specialist or having all the qualifications or having all the knowledge, it's the attitude to the person. Yeah, they may not be, they need to be qualified enough, but qualified enough is by definition qualified enough. What happens after that? Well, maybe you've got a delta with all modules distinction, but you're really difficult to work with. And I can see that in the interview. You are really just a difficult person to communicate with. I think you're not going to be a good fit for the team. I'm not going to hire you. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm going to have to pay you more. It has nothing to do with the fact that, like, by all means, methodologically, they're probably an asset to the team. But if they are difficult to work with, that's going to affect the entire team in a negative way. On the other hand, if I've got someone who's maybe they've got a CELTA, they're qualified enough, they've got a little bit of experience, but they're really open and engaged, open to learning, and open to trying, they take feedback really well. Well, I'm probably going to take this person because even over the delta triple distinction, because I'd rather have someone who I can invest in, who is going to pay me those returns, than someone who's going to create problems for me rather than solve them.
Sure. Okay. You've probably heard about those weird questions that interviewers sometimes ask. Like, for example, how to eat an elephant, or I don't know, things like that. So what do I do if I'm asked one of those weird questions?
You reconsider your desire to work in that place. No. What I would suggest is that if someone's asking you a question like that, they're not interested in the answer. They're interested in seeing how you respond to the question. How do you think through a problem? How do you think on your feet? Because the only wrong answer that you can give to that is, I don't know. And lots of people do that in interviews. When you ask them a challenging question, they say, well, I don't know, I'm sorry. And you say, well, that's probably the worst possible answer you can give. I'd rather have a wrong answer than that.
How should I answer such questions?
So I would start by thinking on your feet. Let the examiner or let the interviewer know, well, okay, that's a tricky question. Let me think for a second. Well, I guess I would do this. And it doesn't really matter what your answer is, because they're probably going to ask you, so why? So you can explain it to them and talk them through it, because what they're probably looking for is your ability to solve a problem on the spot. I can give a really concrete example of this. I was interviewing a guy recently for a job, and I asked him a really tricky question. I asked him kind of, how would you use your knowledge of the culture where you're going to be working, planning your lessons? And he stops for a second, he thinks, and he says, well, what I would do is I would be myself, but in a way which is culturally acceptable for them. But I'm not going to try to be someone who's not me. I'm going to use all of the things that can engage them about me, but I'm going to package it to them in a way which is acceptable to their culture.
I would hire that guy.
Yeah, I did hire him. I mean, his answer was much more detailed than that. I'm giving an overview, but yeah.
Right. Okay. So actually, my answer doesn't really matter. It's just the way how I think, probably, and Okay. Next question. I've been asked to teach a demo lesson. What do I focus on?
Well, probably the first thing is if they're asking you to teach a demo lesson, hopefully they're not just saying, teach this, go. Probably they're giving you a page from a course book. They're giving you some time to plan it. They may ask for a lesson plan. What I want to see with teachers who interview with me, I don't want to see a teacher who tries to impress me.
Mm-hmm.
That never ends well.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to see when I see a demo lessons, I want to see solid, basic fundamentals. I want to see if you can give instructions, set up an activity, check that they understand the instructions, monitor the students, be helpful, give them meaningful feedback on what they're doing, meaningful assistance.
Mm-hmm.
Can you wrap up the activity, and can when the activity's finished, can you provide meaningful feedback on what was done? That's in the first place what I'm looking for. And in my experience, probably 9 out of 10 teachers who I watch teach struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's me being a little bit generous. So that's the thing that I would focus on first, is good, solid fundamentals. It doesn't matter if you can do the crazy stuff that you may need once in a blue moon if the basics are not correct. Now, if the basics are there, then we can talk about, okay, but also student-centeredness. Okay, well, yeah, a teacher can manage students and work with student-centered as well, especially as, for example, I work in a secondary school where student-centered approaches with teenagers and young learners are a little bit tricky at times. And if they can do that, great. Can they convey meaning well? Can they check understanding of the students? Can they stage the lesson logically in a way that achieves its aims? There are things beyond just classroom management and setting up activities and managing them. But that's my first port of call, is can they do this basic thing? Because nothing else matters if they can't do that.
All right, okay. Now, next question is coming to asking questions myself. Can I actually ask questions during my interview?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, a good interviewer is always going to ask you at the end, like, do you have any questions? And I would probably ask questions if you've got them. I mean, but there have been times where I've interviewed and I've not had questions after, because they answered all of them. But I usually make a show of like, no, here was my list of questions. Like, you've answered all of them. I showed them the list of questions with the tick. And it's best.
You're joking, right?
No, I'm absolutely serious. I've done this.
Really?
Yeah. I got an offer too. That was
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would write these out beforehand, so that way you know what questions you want to ask. Questions that I would ask are things like expected hours, conditions, who you'll report to, will you have a mentor or not, to help you get on board, because many schools may have a mentoring program that they'll put you into. If you're working in your home country, do you have to sign a non-compete? Can you work for other schools? Is it a part-time position, or are you taking a full-time position? If you're taking a full-time position, is it full-time meaning you've got promised hours, or is it full-time salaried? Because full-time with promised hours can get a little bit dicey sometimes. Not always. I've worked on full-time promised hours before, and I've been just fine. But I know people who struggle because of that. If you're applying for a job abroad, you also need to ask about things like the visa process. Will they pay for your visa or not? Do you have to pay for it? Even if you do have to pay for it, will they do your visa for you, or do you already have to have a visa? Because some places they only want people who already have visas.
And it's a lot of work.
Yes, it is a lot of work. Which you're finding out now. Yeah. It is a lot of work, and it's a lot easier if the school will kind of help you do that.
Of course, yeah.
What else? The other thing is that what documents you'll need, if they need anything for the visa process, things like that. Will they help you find an apartment? Or will you be on your own if it's in a different country? Like, will they provide accommodation for the first period of time? Can you set up a deal with the school where they'll find you a landlord, because different schools do it differently. I've worked for schools that provided apartments. They before anyone thinks like, oh, providing apartments. No, you were better off renting your own. I've worked for schools which put you in touch with the landlord. So they just kind of had a set of landlords who they worked with, who they knew, who they would say, okay, well, this person's got an apartment, this person's got an apartment. And that was probably the best deal that I've had, because I got some really good landlords that way. Versus where we live now, where we just kind of sorted it out ourselves.
Yeah.
But it's always worth asking about these things.
What about documents? For example, if I need to legalize any documents in another country,
they should tell you.
Translations. What kind of translations I need to get?
A good school will tell you, and they will typically have an HR department or lawyer who will walk you through the process and do everything for you.
Okay. So let me ask you another question. How do I actually deal with salary questions? Because, this is one of those kind of uncomfortable questions to ask, but still very important one.
Well, one, before you go to the interview, I would have an awareness of what the going rate for someone of your skills and level of experience is. And you need to be really honest with yourself about that, and make sure that you're not overestimating how much you're worth, but also not underestimating how much you're worth. If you're going to apply for a job at a big international school, like for example, and any of the big international groups, like anything like BC, Bell, International House, English First, like anything, they're probably going to have a pay scale already sorted out, which they're going to say, okay, teacher, qualification, years of experience, okay, this is what I offer them. And this is usually, this may have a little bit of wiggle room, but there's usually not that much. If you're going to apply for a smaller school, they probably also have pay scales, but there may be a bit more flexibility there. So the thing number one is, well, oftentimes they'll put it in the job listing. And if it's in the job listing, I wouldn't expect to go outside of the range that's given in the job listing. If it's not given in the job listing, I would ask them directly, well, they're going to ask you, how much would you like to be paid? And this is a question that is best to answer with another question. And the question is, what is the budget that you have to fill this position?
Okay.
So you notice the question's not how much are you prepared to offer me, because that begins the negotiation. But here I'm just finding information for saying, what's the budget that you have for this? Like, up to how much can you spend to hire me? And they might say, well, it depends. So you double down, you say, okay, so a general range, then a rough estimate. Be nice, but get them to make the first offer, because they may make you the first offer and you see, well, we're a bit further apart than I thought we were. This was actually what happened quite recently. Because you remember, I was offered a position, for context, I was offered a position doing basically the same job I do now, but for a school in Los Angeles. And when they told me the salary for the position, it was kind of very, very far away from my expected salary. And that was one of the reasons that I didn't take it, was because, well, for that job in that area, the salary, well, that's going to be a bit tricky. Plus, like, all the other logistical things, like, it might have been worth it, but we had better offers. So that's what I would say is make them make the first offer, but do it in a very non-confrontational way of just asking them, like, how much can you offer someone in this position? Or what do you usually offer someone with my qualifications?
Okay. Is it a good idea to ask, for example, how much did the person get before me?
You can. The thing is that the person before you might have had a very different profile to you. So, for example, the person who if the person before you had a CELTA and 2 years of experience and you've got a Delta and 10 years of experience, you should probably be on a very different pay scale than they were.
True. But for example, if let's say I'm being interviewed not for a position as an English teacher, but a director of studies.
Well, in that case, yeah, that should be more or less fixed. So if you're interviewing for a position as a DOS, then yeah, I would want to know how much the last person who had the position was paid. Absolutely. And the other thing is that if they offer you a salary that's lower than you would like, you can, depending on the offer, if it's enough, because we need to distinguish between like when it's not enough and when it's enough, but you would like more. If it's not enough, obviously that's a no. It's thank you for your time. Goodbye. If it's, well, it's enough, but I'd like more. Well, maybe is there something else that the school might offer you? So for example, well, they say, well, it's not quite what I would like, but we'll train you up as a Cambridge examiner. Oh, okay, that's something. Or we'll train you up as an IELTS examiner. That's really something. Or, well, we need someone to teach IELTS classes, so we'll train you to teach IELTS classes and we'll give you some. That's a big deal because IELTS is big. IELTS is a kind of a big career step. Or even things like, well, there might be perspectives for you to move into teacher training later on, teacher education. They'll teach you how to do that. They'll give you opportunities to present in conferences. So yeah, maybe you're not quite making as much as you would like to be making, but you're getting things offered to you in other areas where it kind of makes up for it. I worked for a long time like that, kind of where I knew I theoretically could be making more, but I took the positions that would advance my career further, even if they weren't the best well paid at the time. And it's paid off several years down the line. It's paid off quite well.
Of course. Okay, so let's say that all the steps of looking for a job, applying, the interview, I've done, and unfortunately, I didn't get the job. What do I do in this case?
Let's see. Well, just to make this a bit human, I started my current position in May this year. I was rejected from one job before I was offered this one because it wasn't a good fit with the company. It wasn't that it was a position that I was, in all honesty, probably overqualified for. And the head of, it was for a teacher training position, and the head of teacher training and I had some very different ideas about how things should be run. And I think that she saw me as a potential problem later on. So fine, I wasn't very heartbroken about that, but I got rejected. I've also turned down job offers.
Oh, that can also happen. Oh
yeah.
My God.
Yeah.
Joke, of course.
Yeah. So you may say no to them, they may say no to you, but it's a numbers game. I still get rejection letters from job applications that I was sending in March and in April. I got one from Pearson the other day. Yeah, Pearson does not want me to work for them apparently. Yeah.
Oh no, why? Why
Heartbroken. Very talented pool of applicants, and yeah, no idea why. You never do, because it's not like I had the interview or anything. I just applied to them back in, I don't know, April when I was looking for something, or February even. And yeah. So you might get rejected. That's fine. 100 people can say no. You just need one person who says yes. It's a numbers game. Maybe them saying no was actually doing you a favor. Maybe you actually didn't want to be there.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. Then next question. What if I'm lucky and I've been offered a position?
The first thing that I would do is double check, make sure that this is what you really want, because you'll get the job offer and it may sound really great. You remember what I'm talking about here. Yeah. It may sound really great on paper, but then the more you sleep on it, the more you think about it, you think, I'm really not sure. if you decide to accept it, I would let them know pretty quickly. But feel free to ask them for a little bit of time to think about it if you need it. You might not need time to think about it. It might just be yes, full steam ahead, let's go. In which case, you just start the process. You message them back, you email them, you big thank you, I accept the job. Please let me know what I need to do. And then I would start trying to work out a starting timetable, induction timetable, start date, things like that. Yeah.
And well, I think that you've mentioned that, but I'm going to ask you just one more time. What do I do if, for example, I've been offered a job and I quite like it, but I'm still not very sure about it. It's not really what I wanted.
Well, it depends on really what you're looking for. It might be good enough just for now, and maybe in a year you'll look for something different. Well, in which case, okay, that's a reasonable thing to do. We've already talked about the fact that you can also, if it's a salary issue, you can ask them for things as long as they're paying you enough, which are maybe it could be more responsibilities. Maybe they could take you on as a senior teacher. Or maybe they could give you a difference in title, or maybe they can, maybe you can even say, well, okay, can we revisit the salary question in 6 months? So, okay, yeah, you want to hire me on this salary now? I'll tell you what, that's fine. Can we revisit this in 3 months, in 6 months? See how happy you are with me, and then we can talk about giving me the salary that I want. And the other thing is don't be afraid to negotiate a little bit, but I wouldn't expect them to budge a lot, because for example, like if I think about myself hiring, I've got a pay scale that I can use. And if I hire someone with a master's degree in education or a Delta, I'm bringing them in at a very different pay scale than I'm bringing in someone who's got, a TEFL certificate or just a CELTA who's fresh off the course. And if you ask for too much more, it's like, well, I could just hire someone with a master's for that. So why should I hire someone, assuming I'm not desperate, why should I, and they might be desperate, why should I hire someone for the price of a master's and get someone who I'm going to have to invest a lot in when I could pay this much and get a finished product? So I wouldn't expect them to be to go too crazy high, but you can always negotiate a little bit. And it's better to negotiate up front than it is to have resentment about this later. Because one of the things that is always bad is when someone accepts an offer they weren't terribly excited with, and he's like, oh, but I have to do all of this and I'm only making this much. But it's like, you agreed to the job. You negotiated, you agreed to the job. That's just being passive aggressive. And that's not going to do anyone any favors. It's not going to make you happy. It's not going to make them happy.
Yeah, fair enough. So, Chris, thank you very much for your time and for giving all of your advice. I hope that everything that we've talked about today will help teachers to find better jobs. And thank you everyone for devoting your time and for watching this podcast. Please do let us know if we could support you better and if you are interested in anything else. Also, please leave your comments and questions that you would like us to discuss in our next podcast. And thank you very much for watching us. We'll see you in our next podcast. Have a good day. Bye.